if you are trying to improve your art skills or even just find your own art style, I think the absolute best thing that you could possibly do is learn and study from other artists. Whether you want to call them art gods, whatever you want to call them, there are artists that every time you see their artwork, you're like, I want to create art like that. Let's say your art skill is like here and theirs is like here. For you to get to this level, I think the best thing you can do is learn and study from those artists to figure out what they do that makes their art so good. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to show you my process for learning from other artists and how I actually study from other artists to kind of take that and improve my own art. So I'm a very visual person, I'm sure you probably are too. So the first thing that I always like to do is create a vision board, mood board, whatever you want to call it. Basically, we're going to collage a bunch of artworks together so that we can study them. I just find these really helpful for just having a more concrete idea of what we're trying to achieve. You can go on Instagram, you can go on Pinterest, although there is a lot of AI slop on there. Just find art that really inspires you and try to get a variety of styles. See if you can find like 5 to 10 artists that you really admire and choose their artwork. The more artists that you choose, the less likely you are to sort of get like that tunnel vision. Whenever you just pick like 1 or 2 artists, your art can start to look a lot like theirs, and that's not really what we want here. We're trying to learn as much as we can from a variety of sources. So the more that you can pull and the more different types of artwork that you can pull, the better. And now we're going to start analyzing the art that we've pulled. This is probably the most difficult part of this entire process, especially if you are kind of new to this. It's kind of difficult to look at a piece of art and know what it is that makes it so good or what it is that you like about it. Sometimes, I know for me, that was really tough to do. I can look at artwork and be like, oh, I love that. And then I couldn't tell you why. I feel like this is kind of a skill that you have to learn to improve at. I think the more that you do it, the better you'll get at it. But that's what we're going to try and do here. So we want to analyze the artwork that we've chosen and see if we can figure out what it is that we like so much about it or what makes that art so good. So this can be things like composition or maybe color palettes that an artist uses. Or maybe you really like the way that they draw eyes and faces. Basically, you're just trying to figure out what makes their art unique and stand out. Why is it on that next level? So just to kind of give you a better idea of what this would look like, I wanted to analyze the art of a couple of artists that I really admire. And the point of doing this is just so we can recognize what makes artwork more appealing, so that you can use that in your own artwork. So for example, if you really like Frostbite Studios' work, maybe because they draw some of your favorite book characters, but on a like deeper level, they also are like a master at composition and composing a scene in a really appealing way. So if you've never really thought about composition, you can study their art and learn how to better compose characters on the canvas in your own work. And so I'm going to look at Loish's work first. I have been following her art since like DeviantArt in middle school. She was really one of the first artists that I ever saw who created that like painted texture in digital art. I think she actually calls her process like sculpting with color. She uses colors off the canvas to sort of render and refine and give shape to her art. I really love the look that this gives, and her art is a little bit messier in comparison to like Frostbite Studios, for example. I think this messier look actually helps Loish's work look a little bit more dynamic. She also uses these really like soft shapes in her work, and it makes her art feel very like flowy, and there's like a lot of movement. And again, to compare it to Frostbite Studios here, their art has a lot more like sharp edges and lines, and this is just like a stylistic choice, but depending on what you're going for, you could study the specific art style of both of these artists and figure out how they get that like softer dynamic look or like a more harder refined look. And the last thing I want to mention about Loish's art is her color choices are always so beautiful. I think she's really good at having these muted color palettes with just like a few brighter colors, and it always makes the painting like pop and stand out. And moving on to Frostbite Studios, like I said, they have a similar rendering style to Loish's work, but it's a lot less messy. Like there's not any sketch lines, and it's a lot more like refined and clean. One thing I really love about their work is They are masters at composition. Anytime that I've tried adding like multiple characters to a scene on a canvas, the composition gets like a million times harder because you have to fit multiple people in this small canvas, and it's just different than you would with just one character. But I think they're really good at having the characters just composed really well, and it looks effortless. Whenever I'm drawing, especially multiple characters, but sometimes even just portrait drawings, sometimes I will like kind of go through her work to see how she handles a similar composition, just to kind of get an idea of the kind of composition I want for my own work. And the last artist that I kind of want to analyze a little bit is Kelly Chong, or After Blossom art. Her work is like my go-to inspiration for book cover design. This is a very different style from like Lowish and Frostbite Studios, but still it's super gorgeous. I feel like my style tends to be closer to Lowish and Frostbite Studios, but I still think you can learn from different art styles. And with her art, her color palettes are so pretty. Like, are you kidding me? This is gorgeous. Another way like her style differs from Lowish and Frostbite Studios, they add texture through like rendering and like paint strokes in a lot of their art, but she actually uses like designs and symbols and images to create that texture. And I think she focuses a lot more on textured brushes than these other two artists, which is just so cool. Like, I'm always in awe of people who can do this kind of art, because I definitely lean more towards art that's like much more rendered. So I always think it's cool to kind of study this kind of art just to get a better idea of how they do it. And once you've done this, some exercises that I would recommend doing is art studies. So there's a couple of ways to go about doing an art study. I did one recently of Sam Does Arts, actually, where I did another mood board of just his work and tried to recreate my own painting in his style. I'll leave that video linked so you can find it. But basically what I did is just like analyze a specific style and decide what makes their style so unique, and then try to recreate it myself. It's almost like getting like a hands-on practice with another artist's work, and I feel like it goes like another step further than just looking at their art and analyzing it. If you're trying to make an artwork in another artist's style, like, you have to have a really good understanding of their style, right? Every single time I do an art study, I always learn something new. I can kind of take that with me to the next painting that I do for my own art and really learn from that experience. Another kind of way to do an art study is, instead of creating your own painting in that style, you can actually try to literally recreate that artist's artwork. I kind of imagine these more like a draw this in your style. I'm taking like their original painting and then just making it my own. You can still learn a lot doing it this way. I do think that painting a brand new painting in their style, I feel like I always learn more from doing it that way, but I do think it is a little bit easier, especially if you're just beginning, to just recreate one of their paintings. And I always give this disclaimer anytime I'm talking about doing art style studies. If you do an art style study, always make sure you give credit to the original artist. Never try to claim artwork as your own, especially if you're like recreating an initial painting from another artist. You never want to pretend like those ideas were fully your own if you are heavily referencing another artist. But yeah, just always make sure you're giving credit. Like I said, if you want to see an art style study in action, I do have a video that I did of Sam Does Art style. You can check that video out here. And other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!